I'm not a big fan of reality shows, but recently my wife began binge watching old episodes of Undercover Boss. Now, I had heard of the show before, but had never watched a single episode up until now. After a few episodes, I found myself really enamored with the show because I thought it highlighted some very important things about corporate America, both the good and the bad. So this week I'm going to talk about my takeaways from binge watching the show with my wife for a few days. Welcome to the BBE Social Media channel. My name is Blaine Bryant, Director of Marketing and Public Relations for BBE Social Media, and the creator of the Simplex OBA program that helps aspiring entrepreneurs start their own online business in just 30 days by simplifying online business architecture. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like below and consider subscribing to our channel and hit that notification bell so you'll never miss out on more videos like this one. So I'm going to go through a few key takeaways that I gathered from binge watching the show Undercover Boss this past week with my wife. And I'll explain why all CEOs need to watch the show if they've never seen it before. First, a little bit of background on the show if you haven't seen it before. Undercover Boss is a show where the CEO or other high-ranking company person goes undercover within their own company, typically in the entry-level employee positions, to better understand their company and employees and the challenges they face both personally and professionally. Now, the show was based on a British TV series of the same name and first aired here in North America in 2010 on the CBS network, where it's still running to this day. The whole theme of the show is that the boss is disguised and spends a week working alongside their employees in different locations and in different roles within the company. The idea here is that the CEO will experience what it's like to be an entry-level employee of their company and what challenges they face financially, personally, and professionally. The CEO then has first-hand knowledge of any things that they can immediately change within the company that will make things better in terms of efficiency or work environments or other things. At the end of each episode, the model employees are usually rewarded by their boss with promotions, college funds for their kids, cars, houses, cash, or other things. The terrible employees are either sent for retraining or outright fired on the spot in some cases, as I saw. Now, before I continue further, I will point out that the show has been subject to mixed reviews, some praising the concept while others are dismissing the show as nothing more than blatant propaganda. Now, that controversy aside, I think the show overall still has some very important takeaways that all CEOs should consider no matter the size of their companies. So that brings me to takeaway number 1. Take care of your employees and they will take care of you. Now, some of the episodes of the show have focused on entry-level employees of food service outlets like Fatburger, Menchie's, and Boston Market, just to name a few. Now, when watching those episodes, it was immediately evident to me that a number of employees in these places had the same financial challenges, which sometimes affected their job performance. They had trouble affording rent, getting transportation to work, or affording childcare for their kids while they were at work. Now, one man in one episode I watched was a single father having to bring his daughter to work with him, where she sat in the dining area of the restaurant reading and doing her homework. The other overwhelming concern was that many employees simply felt that their contributions went unnoticed or unappreciated. And that brings me to one of the most controversial topics highlighted by this show: the enormous income inequality between CEOs and their lowest level employees. Now, I personally have always believed that taking care of the people that take care of running your business is always just good policy. And I'm not just talking about wages either, but overall the idea here is that when employees are treated with respect, made to feel valuable, and when they're paid enough that their lives are better as a result of working for you, then everybody involved wins. Because, let's face it, if you didn't have them, you wouldn't have a business. Now, I know that this can be a topic of some controversy in America today, but let me explain why this is an important point to make. Take the case of one Dan Price and his company Gravity Payments. Now Dan, who has been an entrepreneur from the time he was a teenager, found himself bothered by an encounter with one of his employees who, at the time, was being paid about $35,000 a year. Now this employee told Dan that he felt that his company was ripping him off and how his pay rate made it difficult for him to lead a decent life. Now Price felt terrible about the encounter and mulled it over for some time before deciding to make a monumental change in the pay structure of his 120 employees. For 3 years after the encounter, he handed out 20% annual pay raises to his employees. He noticed that during this time, the profit growth substantially outpaced the wage growth. Now, after crunching the numbers and giving it a lot of serious consideration, he announced that over the next 3 years, he would phase in a minimum wage of $70,000 a year and immediately cut his own salary from $1.1 million a year down to the $70,000 a year to help fund it. Now, the resulting flurry of news coverage, support, and, of course, resumes being sent in told everyone in corporate America that Dan had hit a nerve. Now, to make a long story short, there was shock, there was awe, there was people that heralded Dan as a genius, while others laughed and predicted that his business would fail. Now, to this day, however, Dan Price's company has continued to flourish. Now, in a tweet from Dan himself on April 13th of 2021, Dan reported that since implementing his wage increase 6 years ago, the company's revenue has tripled, they're now a Harvard Business School case study, and his employees had a 10 times boom in the number of homes bought. And he ended his tweet with the line, "Always invest in people." And that's the overall point of this first takeaway. It's not just about paying people a good wage. That can certainly help ease some of the burdens that your employees face outside of work. But it's also about showing your employees that they are valued members of your team. In some of the episodes of Undercover Boss, the CEOs found out through their experiences that there were problems within the business that were going unaddressed because these workers' concerns were being brushed off by their immediate management. Now, the tired phrase, "that's up to corporate, there's nothing we can do about it," was thrown around in several episodes, and you could see how frustrated these employees were when they were basically told they just have to deal with it and keep working as best that they can. Now, several CEOs, first of all, had no idea about the problems or that it was causing frustration amongst their employees. The employees were voicing their concerns, but no one was doing anything about it, which made the workers feel ignored or unappreciated. So if you want your company to thrive like Dan Price's Gravity Payments has thrived, you need to get down in the trenches and actually listen to all of the concerns of all of the people that make your business run. The results will speak for themselves with better productivity, higher profits for the company, and less turnaround of employees overall. Because as any business owner will tell you, higher turnaround rates will result in decreased productivity and profitability overall. So that brings me to takeaway number 2. Everybody works on commission. Now, this is just a neat way of saying that if you work hard in America these days, you can achieve anything. You know, the American dream. But from the experience of many people on this show, from what I saw, their hard work and positive attitude didn't always translate into being able to make a good life for them or their families. In other words, for some people on the show, I could see them saying that the American dream was dead from their perspective. They came into work every day, they always gave 110%, but their good ideas went ignored. They were repeatedly passed over for pay raises and promotions, and their dreams of a better life were being perpetually kicked down the road further and further, just like an old tin can. Now, overall, what this highlighted for me while I was watching the show was the unfortunate disconnect between the CEOs and their employees. I could see in episode after episode the gut-wrenching pain that some of these undercover bosses felt for their employees when they learned of some of their struggles both inside and outside of work. And it's that disconnect between the highest level and the lowest level employees that revealed itself as an alarming trend across all of the companies featured on the episodes that I watched. Now, what was ironic in some cases was that the CEOs that had prided themselves as having a family atmosphere for their companies found out, much to their dismay, that many of their employees felt very much the opposite of being in a family environment at work. Now, these CEOs found that they were in danger of losing some of their best employees because of this disconnect and had to take steps to correct it. Now, I understand that in some very large corporations with thousands of employees across hundreds of locations, this kind of disconnect can be very common. But it doesn't have to be that way. Now, I'm not saying that every CEO should become personally involved in the lives of every one of their thousands of employees. What I am saying is that with proper training and communication between the highest levels of management and the lowest levels of management, this level of disconnect can be minimized and concerns can be addressed to keep the best of the best employees working within your company. And that's really what you want as a CEO. You want the best people, you want the best results. But if you focus on results over people, your people won't be your people for very long. So having this communication between the CEO and all other managers in the company will help your company thrive when the best of the best are seeing that their efforts are paying off and their concerns are being met. So this brings me to my last takeaway from the show. Takeaway number 3 is that sometimes the employee is the problem. Now, there were a few episodes that I watched where the Undercover Boss was working with employees that had me screaming at the television that this person should be fired immediately. And this wasn't just a knee-jerk reaction on my part. It came from years of management experience where I learned to identify when an employee just isn't a good fit. Now, to the show's credit, many times the CEO would give these troubled employees a chance to turn their behavior around, usually with some sort of retraining. Now, I thought it was a bad idea from what I saw and from my own experience, but thought overall that it was a noble gesture. Now, it turns out that this gesture wasn't always lost on these people. I did watch a follow-up episode where they revisited some of the most popular stories of that season. Some of these people got their act together and were actually making an effort to do better. But the other ones that I had pegged as deserving of immediate termination were either fired immediately and didn't learn a thing from their experience, or didn't take the retraining seriously and left to find another job elsewhere. Overall, their bad attitudes and poor work ethics weren't always a result of the working environment of the company they worked for. And even when awarded an opportunity to improve, some people just didn't care or learn anything from the experience. In some cases, the immediate manager wasn't taking action to correct this behavior. In some other cases, the manager had no idea. But in some cases, the manager was the problem and was creating a poor work environment for everyone. The point is, as a CEO, you need to have checks and balances in place to identify these problem employees before they become a problem that affects your company's image, your productivity, or your profitability. Now, so far, the Undercover Boss show has focused on the CEOs of large multi-million-dollar, sometimes international companies with thousands of employees. So why are these takeaways important for all CEOs, even ones of much smaller companies? Well, let me use Dan Price's case study again to illustrate why. Now, Dan's company only had 120 employees, so not exactly a huge corporation when compared to the ones on Undercover Boss. Now, Dan's story started out with him being confronted with the concerns of an unhappy employee who thought his wages were far too low to help him lead a decent life. Now, in this case, the employee wasn't the problem. The problem was that the employee felt like he was being taken advantage of. He wasn't living his American dream, shall we say. Now, Dan not only listened to this man's concerns, but took them to heart and began to explore solutions. And he could have just dismissed them like so many other company owners do, believing that the $35,000 a year this man was being paid was a fair market wage. But he didn't. And that was Dan's biggest triumph throughout this entire story. He listened to the concerns, he took them seriously, and then he did something to correct it. And because of that, Dan's business has seen incredible growth, incredible employee satisfaction, and his business is a lesson to other businesses around the world. Why? Because the lesson from Dan's story is that this concept applies to any company regardless of scale. So even if you're a small business owner right now, even if you only have 3 employees right now, these takeaways that I got from watching the TV show are things you need to be aware of as your company continues to grow. Because if someday your company grows to an international multi-billion-dollar territory, you don't want to wait until then to start addressing the problems and concerns within your company. You want to keep on top of it from the beginning all the way up. And that's not just my opinion, because as we've seen from Dan Price's story and from Undercover Boss, these things are the most important things to keep on top of if you want your company to thrive. So, what are your takeaways from watching Undercover Boss? If you've seen the show, let me know what you think in the comments below. And if you're looking for help to start your own online business in the next 30 days, head over to bbesocialmedia.com right now to learn more about enrolling in our Simplex OBA program. And of course, if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe. And until next time, my name is Blaine Bryant. I want to thank you for watching, and I hope you'll come back for my next video next week.